Looks like folks are joining. I know we want to make good use of our time and invite our panelists to have a good discussion. So we might maybe start with some introductions of both myself and Natasha as co-hosts for this webinar, and then our esteemed panelists, our guests, our fabulous, fantastic reviewers. My name is Dr. Zena Galazzo. I live and work on the lands of the Tohono O'odham Nation, which is the ancestral and ongoing unceded territories of the Tohono O'odham and Pasco Yaqui people. I am one of the 2021 ASHE Program Committee co-chairs, and I'll pass it over to my fellow Natasha.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you are. My name is Dr. Natasha Kroom. I'm Associate Professor of Higher Education and Student Affairs at Clemson University. Clemson's main campus occupies the traditional and ancestral land of the Cherokee peoples and was built on land seized through U.S. military and diplomatic incursions, culminating in a treaty in 1777. We welcome you. We're glad that you all are able to join us. I want to say thank you very much to our panelists, because I already know that they're about to give some wonderful, amazing things for us to think about as we enter into reviewing season. And thank you to Jason for getting this set up for us as well.
So I want to just invite our panelists to introduce themselves as well before we get rolling with some questions. Natasha and I both have some questions that we'll kind of roll through with the panelists. And then Jason will come onto screen for the last 15 minutes to really give a nuts and bolts kind of logistical step-by-step. Here's how to go into all academic and do reviews, which hopefully will be helpful too. So maybe we'll start off with Genia. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everybody. Good morning here on the West Coast. My name is Genia Betancourt. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a postdoctoral research associate at the University of Southern California, which sits on the lands of the Tongva people. This year, for the ASHE Program Committee, I have the honor of co-chairing the section on undergraduate students and graduates, persistence, resilience, and outcomes.
All right, and then we'll bump right below you on my screen to Wilson.
Thank you, Z. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Wilson Alcalo. I'm an assistant professor of higher education at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. I use he, him pronouns. The University of North Carolina, Wilmington is located on the traditional territory of the Kohari people, the Lumbee, the Marin, the Occaneechi Saponi, the Halawa Saponi, Waccamaw Siouan, Saponi, and Eastern Band of Cherokee. This sort of conference season, I get the good privilege of co-chairing our CEP pre-conference with Dr. Lucia Ariano.
Great, and Andres.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Andres Castro Samayoa. I'm an assistant professor at Boston College, which is located on the territories of the Aquinnah Wampanoag, Nipmuc, Massachusetts, and Mashpee Wampanoag tribes. I also have the pleasure of joining the planning committee this year for ASHE, thinking a little bit about methods and philosophy. So thanks for having us here too.
Excellent. Thank you all for joining us, for gifting us your time and perspectives. As Natasha mentioned, if folks who are watching this have questions, feel free to use the chat and we'll try to incorporate some of those questions throughout. We also have some guiding questions for our panelists that we might start off with. And the first question is probably it's kind of like a grand tour question, big 30,000 feet kind of view. But just kind of curious for the three of you, how do you approach reviewing proposals? And I'm not thinking just about content, but also affectively, like, are there ways that you ensure that you're in a good head and heart space as you move towards reviewing?
Somebody's got to start, right? I'll talk a little bit. So to give a shout out to another colleague, I think about Dr. Layla McLeod posted something on Twitter last year about you're working with somebody's baby, right? Like they put a lot of time and energy into this and you want to be a good steward of their work. And I appreciate that point. Like I think a lot about like, okay, how am I helping this person take this idea and move it forward? Maybe that's at ASHE, maybe it's beyond ASHE into ultimately a different conference or a different paper, but this is, work usually worth doing in some context. And so how do we help support each other in that area? And then I also think back about my own first ASHE submission when I was a doctoral student and I was taking a class paper and trying to submit it to the conference. And so what was the kind of feedback that was beneficial to me at that time? And so just really recognizing that we all have different knowledge. Folks have done a number of different submissions in the past, but regardless of where they're starting from, we want to be supportive and also critical in a way that's going to be constructive and helping them move those ideas forward.
I'm happy to add along and also signal boost a contribution from our colleague Oyam Poon, who is joining us right now as well, who shared this really, I think, important perspective. Make sure you're not hangry. So I think that just sort of making sure that when you're scheduling, when you're going to be doing the reviews, that you're offering yourself, I think, the check-in to ensure that you will be developmental, right? And the engagement is really important. Sometimes that also includes making sure that you're in the headspace, right? To feel like you're engaging with people's ideas with the perspective of being a thought partner and someone that can offer feedback in a way that is meant to continue developing the idea irrespective of the outcome of that proposal for this particular conference. So I think that that's the other part as well, is to make sure that whatever the feedback is, especially when you're engaging deeply and critically as well, but more importantly, developmentally, that what takes priority is that the feedback is in the service of continuing that work.
Amplifying my colleagues' points, I think there's something to be said about the metaphor. Take a step back. I think it's important that we think about what it means to be generative, right? And so I think if we find that we can't come to our work in a generative way, oftentimes we table that until we can get to a headspace where we believe that we can kind of add to or think through comments that we've received and or just add to our own work. And so thinking about Dr. Bancor's point around our babies and what it means to be a good steward of someone else's work. We want to approach others in the same way we would approach ourselves and our own work, right? And so I love the notion of what it means to be a good generative steward. And in order to do that, I think we just generally have to be well, right? Have we slept? Have we eaten? Are we holding a particular grudge with someone else? Are we coming from a faculty meeting? I mean, these are, I think, things that I don't want us to sort of ignore as we really sort of take up someone else's work. And so I'm a firm believer that I think ideas, creative ideas, particularly ideas that push bounds, die in the review process, right? They can really sort of just be, they can lose a lot of their life when others don't have or aren't coming to that place with in the spirit of generativity. And I think if we're going to do this sort of spirit and heart work that's able to care for ideas that intend to push us forward and push the field forward, I think we need to be well, or to think about what it means for us to be well. So.
I love all of those responses, right? Like the idea of being supportive and simultaneously, right? That's not in opposition to being critical and being constructive, right? That those things go together. and that, you know, we can approach this process as being thought partners, right? Like this is a place where as a reviewer, we get the opportunity to be developmental. And I really love, Andres, how you were saying about people thinking about developing these ideas beyond this one decision of this one process. And of course, the spirit of generativity, excuse me, and being a generative steward. And of course, eating a Snickers, taking a nap. And, you know, Wilson, the thing that you really stood out for me that you said that I don't know that I've ever thought about, right, is this like recognizing your grudges, whatever those might be. Right. So like, okay, you're an expert in your area. That's why you got to sign the review, right? Like, are you upset because they didn't cite four of your pieces, right? Like thinking through even some of that, right? Like it was the first thing that came to my mind when you said that, Wilson, but probably other things as well. So sort of moving us to our second question, and I think all of these are great and kind of fit in here, but maybe there's some places where we want to expand. But thinking about what values or particular ethic or ethics have you used to guide how you're reviewing, or particular principles that you use as guides when reviewing others' work?
I'll go ahead and get us started with this particular question. And just kind of building off of Natasha's last point, you know, you mentioned this notion of grudges, but, you know, I wonder how many of us can function as kind of the gatekeepers that we sort of that we don't want, right? The things that we sort of talk about not wanting in our field. I think we need to sort of be careful and kind of monitor how we might function in that capacity for folks who are, again, introducing ideas or introducing, you know, new ways of thinking about the work. And so, so thank you for that. Also, you know, I think this notion of grace and rigor in partnership is really interesting. And I'm a firm believer that I think grace doesn't need to be devoid of rigor, right? I think we can still push ideas and still be kind and thoughtful. One of the things I think about when with the review is if I can't sign my name to the end of this, as if it's going to go out publicly or end up on social media somewhere, then I don't write it, right? I think people can do strange things under the auspice of anonymity. And so I want us to sort of think about how do we think about accountability? How do we sort of put ourselves, would you be willing to add this to your dossier? Like, would you be willing to show your mother the sort of things you are writing about your colleagues, right? I think these are the sorts of things that I don't want anonymity to sort of keep us from sort of the thoughtfulness, I think, that we can approach our work with. Also, I think about the sort of the principal ideas that are going forward, right? And so I ask myself, what's the principal idea that this paper or this scholar is attempting to advance? From there, I'm able to kind of locate perhaps the gap that they might be attending to, and then be able to provide feedback in that way. But I think locating the principal idea, right, or the principal critique that's going forward in a particular proposal, I think is really important, because that helps to hone the feedback that I ultimately want to give. So those are a few things that come to my mind.
Thanks, Wilson. I'll contribute to expand as well as a little bit about, you know, the affordances of anonymity should not really be about then this invitation to then construct or engage with other people's work in a way that is harmful. And I think that another way that can often be harmful when we think about reviewing work, whether it's anonymous or not, is to only think about it as a construct of quality checking, and with the emphasis being on the sort of check And I think that the reviews are really an opportunity for us to then make sure that we actually demonstrate engagement with people's submissions. So rather than a pithy remark, somebody remark that is just sort of saying, yeah, this looks good, I think it's one of the opportunities, much like submissions of full manuscripts for journals, where we then get to be very explicit in how we have engaged with people's ideas. So both the things that I think we want to highlight and commend the submitter for, and then being able to draw attention and make that explicit, because it might be, if we're working or presuming under the notion that we're unsure whether this is a first submission or not, then of practicing the idea that we want to make explicit what is working well in that submission, as well as the things that we want to invite people to reconsider for future iterations of the work. And that is most effective when we sometimes actually directly quote from the submission and draw attention to specific parts of them. So I think that that commitment to moving past just a quality check is, I think, one potential guiding ethic to think a little bit about.
I really appreciate that point. And, you know, I do think it is one of those opportunities that we get to be in community around work in different ways, you know, even though there is this element of anonymity that I feel like when I'm reviewing or when I'm doing other like roles in the conference, sometimes I get to focus in a way that I don't always on work and really think through all of the specific pieces. Yeah, I would agree with my colleagues. The only other thing I was thinking about was reviewing as like an equity-based practice, and knowing that feedback is really important for people in their scholarly careers. And so thinking about that investment as something that we make in one another to help push our work forward, and that oftentimes lack of good feedback is problematic and reinforces different stratification or different networks. And so I really try to think about, like, for me, giving quality reviews and really taking the time to invest in people's work is part of my broader commitment to equitable practice and supporting early career, or regardless of career stage, scholars in developing their ideas. And so I have a duty to take that seriously and try to help move those ideas forward.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing from the three of you thinking about how to approach reviews with curiosity, wonder, and grace. And I appreciate the perspective, Wilson, that you mentioned about how grace and rigor need not be seen as necessarily antagonistic, that we can have both of these things together at the same time. And you know, the call to think through an equity mindset, and to not think about this as, to use your phrase, Andres, quality checking, I think is really, really important, right? So how can we think with the submitters rather from our own perspective as a reviewer, right? So it's not about, has someone cited the right person that I think is the right person as a reviewer, but how are people using literature to build a case, right? How can we be in community through the review process, which I really appreciate you three really talking about. I think that this next question, you know, might help us perhaps get a little bit closer to the ground and thinking about the how of some of the things that you've been talking about through these first couple of questions. But I know that we have a lot of first and second time reviewers on our call today. And I know that for some of us old heads who have done reviews for years, it's always good to have some help in thinking through things too. What tips and strategies would you give to folks about reviewing?
So especially for, I think, first time, second time reviewers, or folks who have done reviews, but maybe not in the context of ASHE, I think that taking a moment to remind yourself of what then have been the criteria that reviewers are invited to consider is important, and then thinking about structuring your engagement with the submissions with those criteria in mind, to just sort of structure how you might think a little bit about your own feedback. And also, I think spacing things out is important. So when you receive the message saying, this is what you've been assigned, then looking at a little bit about what that labor might look like, and then thinking about your specific context and when it might be suitable to be able to submit those in a way that then feels like you're actually doing that work. Or maybe you're submitting everything on the day that everything is due, but you've been reading them in advance, or you've been saving your progress as in a way that feels a little bit more scattered and more sustainable. I think that those are two important practices. And the last one that I'll mention is that I find myself often beginning the review by saying like a couple of sentences to just say, this is how, as a reader, I think that your project is about, and what you think is especially important about this, and how it fits within the constellation of work that you were referencing. So basically offering this sort of quick lay overview of what the project is, so that folks can do a bit of a check to see if the way that maybe they are thinking about the work is hopefully coming across to an unaffiliated reader as well.
Yeah, really, I really appreciate those points. I think that the notion that reviews take time, right? And I think to give thoughtful reviews takes time. So one of the things I try to think about is, well, one, right, when's the due date? And I'm speaking really thinking about Dr. Hall, Candace Hall's question in the chat. And really, we could probably just read that verbatim as a tip. So I'll go ahead and do that for folks. But Dr. Hall asked, can you speak to the importance of planning to do the reviews? For instance, making sure we're not rushing at the last minute to do the reviews, trying our best, the best of our ability to have time to not only read the proposals, but also to think through and mull it over. And I think that's just good practice. So so thank you, Dr. Hall, for offering that. One of the things I also do is, so I don't sort of just complete the review and submit. I'm a person who likes to kind of write the review. Well, one, kind of read through, annotate for me. Then I'll sort of go back through and kind of write out questions or thoughts that I might have about the particular proposal and or manuscript. From there, I then write the review, if you will. And I like to sit on things. And so I'll sit on it for a day or two and then cycle back to that just to make sure that the ideas that I'm proposing, the critiques that I'm proposing are fair, that they're consistent throughout, that they make sense and are coming across in clear ways for the reader. And so really it's trying to think about, again, how do I monitor myself and the feedback that I'm offering folks? But to Dr. Hall's point, making sure that I'm carving out time where I can provide a thoughtful review.
I appreciate both of those points. And I agree with Dr. Okello. Like, I am also kind of I'll read, I'll take a bunch of notes, and then I'll kind of try to form my assessment of the proposal. And I will often read a couple before I enter anything into the system to kind of gauge, especially with the numerical rankings, like what am I seeing as a 3, a 4, a 5, to try to get a sense. So I definitely appreciate that strategy. One of the other things I really wanted to highlight for this question is the different comment boxes. So I find the comments to the program committee box really helpful. And as a program committee person, I hope that other folks will as well. But that's often when I'll kind of give some broader sweeping feedback about where I think the submission might fit into the ASHE program. So for example, every once in a while you'll get a really great session. I was looking at the ones I got for this conference, and I saw a really great PBDS session. And it didn't quite match the rubric criteria, but I could see it offering this really great contribution, and I could see how it might play out in the session. And so my qualitative feedback was not necessarily aligned with my quantitative feedback. And I was able to use that box to talk to the program committee and say, hey, I think this would have this contribution, and I think it could be a really great session. It's just maybe not packaged in this way. And so oftentimes I'll use those to have a dialogue. I've had a couple sessions that I've said, I think this is a really promising idea. It just maybe needs some more time to develop, to marinate in the author's heads. Could we think about this as a roundtable or a poster that might give it some time to develop further? Like, what are different ways that we might be able to help move this work forward? So I really appreciate that box.
Thank you. Yeah, most of what I'm hearing you all say and what we've heard in the chat from good colleagues is around really thinking about how do you create the space time that you need to be able to give a more thoughtful, full review of these. And I like thinking about how the way in which that's connected to Jeannie, or your earlier point about our investment as an equity issue and initiative, right? And so sort of tying those together. And yes, right, like use the box to communicate with the committee, because folks really are reading those, right? Reading those. And if it comes down to the difference between scoring a 10 and a 9, and, the box is really helpful for folks to be able to see what reviewers were thinking and why they're making how they're making the decision of which one goes and which one stays, right? Because we've all been probably privy to the social media call out of, I got a really high score, but it didn't get accepted, or got really great reviews and it didn't get accepted. And so as reviewers, as diligent as we can be about communicating how our reviews are the way, why they are the way they are, I think is a great tip for sure. And just as a heads up for everyone, so this year we made sure to assign no more than 12 reviews, right, in the first round. And on average, reviewers were assigned 7 reviews. Okay, so 12 is the max, 7 is the average. I know you all have probably received your emails already, and if for some reason you have more than 12, which I think we've tried really hard to check that out, but if for some reason you got 13 or 14, please let us know, reach out, and we will correct that immediately, so that you have no more than 12. Cool. All right. Our next question. So, you're in these service roles. You've been reviewers. You have had reviews done of your own work. What do you wish reviewers did more of, and what do you wish reviewers did less of?
I mean, I'll kick this one off if that's okay. I would say maybe to harken back to Dr. Okello's earlier point of, like, sometimes a feedback point feels more like a personal preference than actually about the work itself. You'll have somebody who maybe doesn't like the methodology or thinks that you should have used this thing. And it's not really about the rigor of the work. It's about maybe somebody else's view of the way the work should be done. And I think that can be really challenging because it doesn't really further the work necessarily, or it's not provided in a way that really makes the work feel seen. I find that for me, the things that are most helpful are specific comments. And so I really appreciate when folks can be specific about, like, maybe you can tie in more literature, specifically these folks, because of this, they're considering this angle that you're not. Your methods, maybe my concern is that it doesn't seem as rigorous as I want it to. And so I need you to include more detail in your final paper so that a reviewer, when you submit this somewhere else, is going to understand all of the work that you did to set the study up. So I think those types of really specific actionable feedback that you can use as an author to move your work forward is what I really look for and I try to provide.
I'll really underscore the point of making things explicit. I think that that's really, for me, like such a key part of something that is important to continue. I'll mention something here as well that I think has been helpful for me as a reviewer, also as a member of ASHE, which is if there has been sort of thinking a little bit about the life beyond the review process of these submissions, right? So especially if this is like a first time review process within ASHE, of thinking about what have been the submissions that you got to review that you then want to sort of check out and see if they ended up making into the final program, and then go into those sessions, not necessarily so that you can then say, oh, by the way, I was the reviewer, you're welcome. Not for that purpose at all, but rather really to sort of asking the question, oh, how did this work continue to evolve or grow after the submission? And I think that that's a practice that I find helpful for a couple of reasons. One, it helps guide where to sort of how to make the program once it's live even more digestible, right? If you're sort of thinking about where to go. But I think it also helps to think a little bit about how ideas continue to shift even after a proposal has been submitted.
Great points. And the only thing I might add is trying to think about our own range and scholarly range. You all are brilliant people, and so this is not a critique of what we know, but I think how can we treat reviewing as an ongoing sort of learning practice for us as well, right? So sometimes we might need to read more, right? We might need to go back and kind of read the piece that someone is citing and saying this is probably kind of directing their work to get some better context for what feedback we might offer. I think there's probably nothing more frustrating than someone attempting to offer feedback on an idea that is sort of misunderstood, right? Because this person doesn't perhaps have the range and or hasn't thought particularly about a piece that is, someone else is centering. And so I guess I wanna invite us to think about an ongoing learning practice in our reviews that says, okay, I might need to read more, or I might need to engage with a colleague. I've talked with colleagues who might say, that's not my particular expertise, but I know someone who is, and this is not to give them the review, so to speak, but to say, can you help me think through this particular idea that someone is proposing so that I might then be able to offer a stronger review for them. So recognizing, I think, just generally our own limitations, but also inviting a learning practice in our reviews, I think can be really important.
I think this is such a vital point that you're talking about, Wilson, and I appreciate the invitation, Andres, to think about this not as an encapsulated experience, but to think about the context in which we're doing these reviews, and to think about it through thinking about knowledge generation, right, and knowledge communities that we're creating. I think this idea of using the review process to think about what your own gaps as a reviewer might be and where you might need to go is a really rich and exciting idea. And I certainly know, Wilson, when I read your pieces, right, like you certainly have helped me think a lot about areas that I can keep on reading and areas that I can keep on exploring, right? And so it's nice to be able to think about how that can happen, not just with published pieces, but also with reviews. I also, Natasha, really appreciate you pointing out the somewhat conundrum of like high scores but a non-accept. I think that like every so often, right, that's probably happened with all of us at some point in time. It certainly has happened with me. And I think that as much as possible, right, if we think about this review process as bigger than just the review itself, then yes, it's sad if those things don't get picked up for conference. And also it's exciting to know that you're onto something good and you can keep moving forward with this idea, right? And so I think I'm not trying to make this positive psychology kind of articulation here, but really trying to think about this. If we think about this as cultivating knowledge and building knowledge, then that could be one way to approach some of these things, right? Before we pass it over to Jason. I know we have about 8 more minutes because I want to make sure that Jason has the full 15 to be able to talk us through the nuts and bolts. But just curious, are there final thoughts about reviews and the review process from our panelists? Also, Natasha, I'm not sure if you have other things that you might want to add, but yeah, just kind of an open space for us to share kind of final thoughts.
Yeah, well, the panelists think, I was just going to say, I really appreciate the last set of responses. I can't tell you the number of times I've read something and read a proposal. And so 2 things sometimes happen. I read the proposal and all of a sudden I have like some sort of reaction to it that I don't know what it is yet. And so I don't finish the proposal. I might read it like 5 times just to be like, am I understanding this? Am I doing this? And then kind of doing that thing that Dr. O'Kell is saying, like, go and like, okay, I've never seen this reference. Let me go look at that. Or let me call my colleague real quick, because I don't know, she reads a whole lot more than I do. And can give me 3 other things to read probably about this topic, even though it's not necessarily her research area. Like, she's just out here reading everything. So I want to echo that. Like, that is so important. And I think sometimes when we sign up to do this work, that we think that it has to be this sort of individual, independent process, and we forget that we are part of the community and part of, and have networks that we can tap. Obviously not the people writing it, and but right, like our networks are expansive, and we don't have to do the thinking alone, for sure. And I really, really, really appreciate Dr. Bencourt's, this is their study, not your study. That you didn't say it that way, but I'm gonna say it that way. And there's a difference between, I see this framework you're using. I appreciate the ways in which it matters in this way. Have you considered this as well, without, saying, actually, your entire research design just needs to be this thing over here. And it's not that. We can't, they ain't going back right now at this point. Right. And so, I always find that like, this is their study, not your study, which I think kind of brings me back to Dr. Samayoa. So let me make sure I say your name right. Samayoa. I'm not saying that right. Say it, tell me again.
Castro Samayoa.
Castro Samayoa.
Welcome, Andres, as well.
No, I'm called everybody else doctor by their last name. But it brings me back to the point that you were making earlier in terms of the starting by clarifying your understanding as the reviewer of the study, right? Because then that helps the person say, oh, that's not it, where I was going at all. That's why you went left on my review. And so I just appreciate how all of these things, at least as I'm thinking about it, are coming together and making a lot of sense together. Any other thoughts from our panelists before we turn it over to Jason?
I guess I just will say, like, I have been surprised that sometimes, I shouldn't be surprised by this because like you're assigned a review because it's your area of expertise, but I don't think I appreciated earlier on that like you're getting into a relationship with some of these works and ideas that you don't necessarily know about. So you may see them again, you may see them as a discussant, you may see them as a reviewer for a publication. And so, I think that's really helped me to frame like, how do I want to build this relationship with this like work with this author, because like I may be reviewing it down the road again. And so I want to be that, like, I want that to be a positive experience, right? I don't want them to dread getting my feedback. I don't want to not tell them things that they need to know. So I'm dreading reading it. Like, I want to be, to harken back to my earlier comment, like a good steward, because we may be in this for a while, hopefully to a really positive end.
Well, I just want to give deep gratitude to the three of you. I know that you three are far too humble to say it, so so we'll heap some praise on you. You know, the reason that we invited these three folks to be on this panel is because they give top-notch reviews. They're really fantastic, and clearly I think you can see from the feedback that they're giving, the way that they approach reviews through a generative mindset, and you know, thinking of it as a developmental process, thinking of it as a piece of the idea around cultivating knowledges, and thinking about how we can learn from reviews, right? Not just teach something through the review process, but learn from reviews. I'm just really thankful for your time. Really appreciate the ability to be in conversation with you, especially as we know that this is a really pressed point in the semester for many of us, and or maybe we're just wanting to enjoy some downtime after our pressed portion of the year. So yeah, thank you on behalf of me and Natasha. I'm really, really appreciative. So I think at this point, we might invite Jason back. There you are. So feel free to take it away if you'd like. So.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, everybody, for being part of this and sharing your thoughts and comments, and just the approach that you came into this with and shared with the folks who are watching live and who will watch the recording later. We very intentionally started with this conversation because before you try to remember your login to the system or anything like that, we wanted to make sure that you had the context. And again, as everyone on the call said, just are in the right headspace and heart space as you approach these reviews. So now for the last 15 minutes or so, I do want to share, you will have to remember your login at this point to get into the system, but I'm going to share my screen and kind of go through more of the how to get into the system, how the system works, things like that. So on Friday, if you were assigned reviews, you received an email from the system. It looked a little bit like this. It came sometime Friday afternoon. If you did sign up to review and haven't received reviewer assignments yet, we always need backup reviewers. So there may still be a point in the process over the next few weeks where you still will be assigned as reviewer. So I want to start off with this email because this is lots of good information. I know it's a little long, but we did want to provide you some good context and information about your reviews and your responsibility as a reviewer. So of course, the deadline is Monday, May 24th at noon Pacific. I will share that there will not be an extension for this deadline. The program committee actually meets the next week. So everything will need to be in by that May 24th at noon Pacific deadline. We do have information down here that if you're not able to complete your reviews by that deadline, if something comes up at the last minute, let us know and we can easily get those reassigned. At the same time, if you finish your reviews early and have some extra time and want to read some more great proposals, let us know because like I said earlier, we always have the need for some last minute reviewers. Once you receive your reviews, we encourage you to log into the system, which I'll do in a few minutes, and actually look through each of the reviews. Just glance over them, make sure that you have either the topical methods or just kind of generalist expertise to review. We also want to make sure that there's not a conflict of interest. So if it's a research partner, if it's a student, if it's a faculty member, that you're able to really easily identify, we ask you to let us know. And for both of these, there are forms for you to complete. You just put in your name, the proposal title, the section, and why you're returning it to us. We've already had quite a few folks who've done this already, so we invite you to do this. Either if you feel like you're not at a place where you can give a quality review, or if you know the person who is submitting. Down here, we also have our review guide, which I'll jump to in a second. Before you begin your reviews, we encourage you to do a few things, and then also some things that we've done from the ASHE program committee and staff perspective to support you in your reviews. So whenever you're ready to log in and get to your reviews, you're first going to go to this website. So this is going to bring you to a landing page on the ASHE website. We very purposefully brought you here because this is a place with lots of resources. So we have the reviewer guide, which if you open it, It has some information about reviewing. It has some information about how to navigate the system, some criteria, information about the process. Typically, most questions that you have will be somewhere in this guide. Again, of course, if you're not able to find it, or if you need more information, our contact information is down here. By all means, feel free to reach out. There's also the webinar, which we will post the recording up here. There's also some articles and information. And then if you go down to the very bottom, there's actually some example reviews. So some examples of some really good reviews and some that may have not been as constructive or reliable. So there are some good examples in there as you begin the process. So to actually get into the system, you will click here to log into the conference portal or All Academic. It's called both. Once you log in with your information, what the screen will look like for you is you'll see your reviewer menu, and over here it will tell you how many pending reviews you have. So pending means you just haven't completed them yet. So I have 7 reviews assigned to me but haven't completed or saved. So once I complete them, I'll say completed. So as you're moving through, this pending number will go down. So once you click on reviews, this is what it will look like. So as you can see, I have 7 reviews assigned across 4 different sections. I also have these other 2 sections, or other 3 really, where there's nothing here. That just means on the back end, the section chairs were considering adding you to a proposal, but you're either at your cap for your overall number or for the number that you volunteered for. Later on, we may assign you to some reviews in these sections, but for now, you're just activated as a reviewer and you don't have any reviews in that section. You just have reviews in the sections where it says pending. So where I'm going to go first is click into the first section. It tells me I have 2 reviews pending in this subsection and 7 pending across all sections. Up here, there's also some information. So the email address you can reach us at if you have any quick questions. Also, the web page we were just on. Down here, it tells me I have 1 individual submission pending and 1 session submission pending. So whenever I look at individual right here, it says I have this oatmeal raisin walnut Clif Bar, which was just something that we made up for this for purposes, training purposes. So individual presentations, these are research papers, scholarly papers, posters, roundtables, and performance visual and digital scholarship. So whenever I log into here and click review, it'll give me some information up here, a warning, one thing to share with you all. Up here is this timer. So after 60 minutes, you are automatically logged out. So if you're in a review and typing stuff, make sure you just hit either this refresh button and it'll just start right over, or move to another page. Also right here is information about the scoring. So what does a 5 mean? What does a 4 mean? And we really want you to really tune your scores as you're making them to this criteria. And we're trying to do this to ensure that every reviewer who is doing a review is thinking in this way. In previous years, we just said 5 points is excellent, 4 points is good, but we've added some more information last year and this year to really clarify that, to really ensure that we have good, pretty much intercoder reliability, if we want to use that term. We also want to ensure that if you're, as you're rating, anything above 4 is typically an accept. So if you're giving a 4 or 5, that's typically accept. A 3, depending on how it breaks out amongst the criteria, may be an accept or a reject. Again, information here about linking you back to the website. And then also just clarifying that there are 3 areas where you will provide feedback. So the rubric here where you will give a value between 1 and 5. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different areas, you will just go in and give it a score. So let me say I want to do a 4 and a 3, and I'm not sure about these yet. I'm going to come back to those. The next place where you're going to provide feedback, so part number 2, is this more qualitative feedback where you're going to provide information both to the association, so to the program committee, as well as to the authors. So for the association, we ask you to give us at least 1 sentence of whatever you want to share. This will not be shared with the authors. This just goes to the program committee. And then comments to the authors. We ask you to provide at least 50 words. I was thinking, as someone said earlier, I actually don't think we have a top cap on this, but at least 50 words of constructive feedback to the author. So the comments to the association, comments to the author are the second piece. And then finally down here is your recommendation. So this is the third piece. So I can say accept, I can say reject. Again, if the scores don't line up, so if I have a 4, 4, 5, and then a 1 and a 1, definitely want to make sure that there's information in at least the comment to authors box, but probably the comments to the association box as well about why that was happening. So going back earlier to what Wilson was saying and then Candace's question in the chat, if I'm at a point here where I started reviewing, but I really want to come back to the study design and the literature, I can always save this and come back later. So if I need some more time to think about it, if there's an article cited that I want to go read that was in the literature review, I can do that. Just click save work and finish later. This will still show up for you as pending. It'll still show up for us on the back end as pending. And then whenever you're ready to complete your review, so whenever everything is done, you feel good about it, you can just click complete review and then accept and continue. So over on this side is actually where the review information will pop up. So the title, this tells me it's a research paper. And in the reviewer guide, it gives you descriptions of what differentiates a research paper versus a scholarly paper versus a poster versus a roundtable. So if you need more information about kind of what you're looking for in each of those, there's information in the reviewer guide that is the description that we also had in the call for proposals. So you won't be able to see the author information because this is a mass process for research papers. If it is an interactive symposia, you will see the author information, and the author or the presenter's information will be able to be considered in your reviews. And I'll go through that in a second. It'll give you an abstract. Again, it'll tell you the type. The proposal text, it'll be typed out here. And for the most part, this pretty much will line up with kind of a normal paper or manuscript progression. So the first thing that you'll probably see is the theoretical or conceptual framework. The next thing you'll see is the literature review. The next thing you'll see is the methods and study design, then finally findings. And then the first and the last one, you'll probably do last as you're going through this process. There's also some information down here, keywords, references, a suggested reviewers, which actually should be showing up there. So I will take that out. But this year we actually allowed proposal submitters to let us know if they have a suggested reviewer or discussant. So in this test one, I said Natasha would be great for this one because she loves Cliff Bars. I actually don't know that, but for this purposes, I'm going to assume she does. And then also it allows you down here to, if the authors or the submitters wanted to do this in an alternate presentation format. So this test proposal is okay with having it as a poster, as a roundtable, either virtual or in person. So I think Genia actually said it earlier, if something you think may fit in a different proposal type, if they said, oh, I'd be willing to do a roundtable, you can put that in the comments to the association, just saying that they said they would love to do it as a roundtable. I think it's at a place where it needs some more development. A roundtable would be perfect for this. And the program committee will review that on the back end. So it tells me I have some issues. I haven't met the minimum word count. And that shouldn't be doing that either. And we will get that fixed. See, part of this is a learning process for me too. So individual presentations, like I said, is research paper, scholarly paper, performance visual and digital scholarship, individual presentation, roundtable, and poster. If we click over to sessions, sessions are interactive symposia, self-designed paper session, and then PVDS or performance visual and digital scholarship session, a full session. So if I click into review for the session, it looks exactly the same. So we have the proposal information. Also, I didn't show this before, but if you want to move these around, you can. Obviously, I was just testing the system, so I didn't put the entirety of the information in here. Like I said, it is an interactive symposia, so these are not masked. So I'm able to see who the participants are in here. And then again, I will go through and provide the numerical feedback here, the typed out feedback to the association and the author, and then the reviewer recommendation, either accept or reject, and then I can click save and finish later. So then if I am done with these two, it'll tell me I actually saved this one. I still have 7 in other sections. What I would do is change the section and then just move on to the next section. So if you're going through initially and just previewing the proposals you have, you can go through and preview them this way, just click through each section. If you're ready to dive in, you may want to start off with a certain section. You may just want to go in order. So that is the way that the system works. So I see there's a few things in the chat. Let me see if there's anything. Natasha is usually my eyes on this. Natasha, anything I missed?
Nope, you're good.
Awesome. Well, I will stop sharing my screen and then invite Z and Natasha and our panelists back to close us out. And again, if you have any questions, like I said, our email address, phone number is multiple places throughout. We try to get back to you as soon as possible because we know many times you're in the system and ready to work. So we try to respond as quickly as possible.
Sorry, I did miss someone used the actual Q&A, not the chat. So it says, what if it's a scholarly paper and it does not have a methodology section? How do you score it? Are the rating categories the same for research and scholarly papers, or do they differ?
That's a great question. So if you go into the reviewer guide on page 7, we actually list out the rubric criteria. For the most part, they're overall the same. So the study design will not appear for scholarly papers. So the study design will only be for research papers, and then the self-designed paper sessions, and then roundtables and posters. It's also in there as well.
All right, look at that. We did it in an hour. Unbelievable. So thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate the attendees joining us. We're recording this, so if you know of people who wanted to be present, wanted to learn with us, couldn't be here at this particular moment, please feel free to let them know that the recording will be up on the ASHE website. And yeah, thanks again to the panelists. Thanks to my lovely co-Natasha, and thanks forever and always to Jason for steering the ship and making sure that we all get everything done on time. So appreciate it. Yeah. Have a good day, y'all.
Thank you.